The clock is ticking toward July 1st, 2026, and the most important trade agreement in North American history is hanging by a thread. The United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, known as USMCA, governs nearly $2 trillion in annual economic activity. It shapes the flow of cars, steel, dairy, lumber, energy, and electronics across borders that have been open for 3 decades. But in less than 90 days, all 3 countries must decide whether to keep the deal alive, let it enter a slow death spiral, or blow it up entirely. Right now, Washington and Ottawa are not even sitting at the same negotiating table. And what happens in the coming weeks will reshape the economies of both nations for a generation. Donald Trump has already made his position unmistakably clear. His top trade official, United States Trade Representative Jamieson Greer, has told Congress that he will not recommend renewing USMCA without major changes. Greer wants concessions from Canada on dairy market access, digital streaming regulations, energy exports, and stricter rules of origin for automobiles. Just days ago, on April 7th, Greer publicly stated that negotiations are unlikely to be resolved by the July 1st deadline. He said talks will continue past that date, which means the agreement could enter an annual review cycle, creating years of uncertainty for every business that depends on cross-border trade. That is not a negotiating tactic. That is a warning shot. On the other side of the border, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney came to power specifically because of Trump's economic aggression. He won the election in April 2025 on a single promise to stand up to Donald Trump and protect Canadian sovereignty. Carney has done exactly that. In January 2026, at the World Economic Forum in Davos, he declared that the old relationship between Canada and the United States is over, not strained, not complicated, over. He said the world is experiencing a rupture, not a transition in the global order. He called on middle powers to unite and build a new order based on sovereignty, human rights, and mutual respect. Without naming Trump directly, Carney challenged the entire vision of American dominance, and Trump understood the message perfectly. The very next day, Trump fired back from the same Davos stage. He said, Canada receives many freebies from the United States, and that Carney was not grateful. Then he delivered a line that became international headline news. He said, Canada lives because of the United States. Remember that, Mark, before you make your statements. Carney's response was calm but devastating. He said, Canada does not live because of the United States. Canada thrives because we are Canadian. Within days, Trump disinvited Canada from his Board of Peace, a new diplomatic initiative focused on the Middle East. The board carried a $1 billion membership fee, and Canada was already skeptical about joining, but the public withdrawal of the invitation was designed to humiliate Ottawa on the world stage. It worked exactly as intended. To understand why this moment is so explosive, you need to understand what USMCA actually is and what happens if it fails. The agreement replaced NAFTA in 2020. It was negotiated during Trump's first term, and at the time he called it one of the greatest achievements of his presidency. But the deal was designed with a built-in expiration mechanism. Article 34.7 requires all 3 countries to conduct a joint review every 6 years. The first review is scheduled for July 1st, 2026. At that review, the 3 nations have 3 options. Option 1, all 3 agree to renew the deal for another 16 years, and everything continues as normal. Option 2, 1 or more countries refuse to renew, and the agreement enters a 10-year countdown with annual reviews until it either gets fixed or expires completely in 2036. Option 3, a country withdraws entirely, which can happen with just 6 months' notice. The United States is leaning toward option 2. That means the deal would not die immediately, but it would enter a decade of uncertainty. For businesses that have built supply chains around predictable rules, that is almost as damaging as a full collapse. The personal dimension between Trump and Carney has turned this trade dispute into something far more volatile. When Carney first won the Canadian election, Trump was surprisingly gracious. He called Carney a very talented person and said they had a friendly conversation at the White House. But that warmth did not last. Carney came to power because Canadians were furious about Trump's repeated suggestions that Canada should become the 51st state of America. Trump said it on Fox News. He said it in interviews with Time magazine. He showed maps with an American flag draped over Canadian territory. He called Justin Trudeau, and later Carney himself, the governor of Canada. For millions of Canadians, this was not a joke. It was an existential insult, and Carney rode that wave of national anger straight into the prime minister's office. Then came the Gordie Howe Bridge crisis. The Gordie Howe International Bridge is a massive infrastructure project connecting Detroit, Michigan, and Windsor, Ontario. It cost nearly 6 billion Canadian dollars to build. Canada paid for the entire thing. Under the 2012 Canada-Michigan Crossing Agreement, ownership of the bridge is split 50-50 between Canada and the state of Michigan. Trump himself endorsed the project during his first term. In 2017, he issued a joint statement with Justin Trudeau, calling the bridge a vital economic link between the two countries. But in February 2026, Trump suddenly reversed course. He posted on social media that he would not allow the bridge to open until the United States was fully compensated for everything we have given them. He suggested that America should own at least half of the asset, apparently unaware that Michigan already owned half. He also made the bizarre claim that if Canada makes a trade deal with China, the first thing China will do is terminate all ice hockey being played in Canada and permanently eliminate the Stanley Cup. Canadian officials were stunned. Carney called Trump directly to explain that Canada had paid for the bridge, that ownership was already shared, and that both American and Canadian workers and steel were used in construction. Former Michigan Governor Rick Snyder, a Republican, wrote an op-ed in the Detroit News correcting Trump's claims point by point. He noted that Michigan got its half ownership without investing a single dollar, but the damage was done. The bridge dispute became a symbol of how unpredictable and confrontational the relationship had become, and then came what may be the most dangerous escalation of all, Canada's outreach to China. Frustrated by Trump's tariffs and rhetoric, Carney began actively diversifying Canada's economic partnerships. He traveled to Beijing and announced a new strategic partnership with China, resolving tariff disputes on agricultural products and electric vehicles. Trump responded with fury. He threatened to impose a 100% tariff on all Canadian goods if Canada moves forward with a trade deal with China. Trump's social media post referred to Carney as governor instead of prime minister. That was a deliberate insult. Canada's trade minister quickly clarified that Ottawa was not pursuing a free trade agreement with China, only resolving specific tariff issues. But here is the critical detail. Under USMCA's Article 32.10, entering into a free trade agreement with a non-market economy like China would allow the other USMCA partners to withdraw from the agreement. Canada knows this. They are walking a razor-thin line trying to build economic alternatives to the United States without triggering the legal provisions that could destroy their access to the American market. Carney is not just diversifying trade. He is reshaping Canada's entire strategic posture. He has increased military spending, pledging to reach 2% of GDP on defense by March 2026 and 5% by 2035. He traveled to the Arctic to observe NATO exercises alongside the German Chancellor and the Norwegian Prime Minister. He removed all restrictions on Canada's air and missile defense capabilities, and he is engaged with Trump's Golden Dome missile defense plan, signaling that Canada is willing to be a serious security partner even as the trade relationship deteriorates. This is a calculated strategy. By demonstrating that Canada is a valuable defense ally, Carney is trying to create leverage in trade negotiations. He is essentially saying to Washington, "You need us for continental security, so do not treat us like an adversary on economics." Whether that strategy works depends entirely on whether Trump sees security and trade as connected or as separate battles. The geopolitical implications of this standoff extend far beyond North America. If USMCA enters the annual review cycle without renewal, it creates a decade of uncertainty that will ripple through global supply chains. Companies that have spent years building manufacturing networks across the US-Canada border will have to reconsider their investments. The automotive industry is particularly vulnerable. Auto parts manufactured in Ontario cross into Michigan and back multiple times during a single vehicle's production. If the rules of origin change, or if tariffs increase, the cost of a single vehicle could rise by thousands of dollars. American consumers will pay more. Canadian workers could lose their jobs. And the competitive advantage that North America has built against China's manufacturing dominance could erode rapidly. Roughly 40% of commercial HVAC systems sold by major American companies are produced in Mexico under USMCA rules. Disruption would not stop at the Canadian border. It would spread across the entire continent. There is also the Alberta question. Trump administration officials have met with Alberta independence activists who are collecting signatures for a possible referendum on separation from Canada. The oil-rich province, which is generally more conservative than the rest of the country, has a vocal separatist movement. A recent Ipsos poll found that approximately 28% of Albertans might vote yes in an independence referendum. British Columbia's premier accused the activists of treason for seeking foreign assistance in breaking up Canada. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith said she would not demonize the million citizens who have lost hope. And Carney, who was raised in Edmonton, Alberta's capital, faces the uncomfortable reality that Trump's economic pressure is fueling separatist sentiment in his own home province. This is not theoretical. This is happening right now. A foreign government is meeting with activists who want to break apart an allied nation. The parallel to Russian interference in European politics is obvious, and it has not been lost on Canadian analysts. One Carleton University professor said Canada is not dealing with a reliable or maybe even a rational leader of the United States. So what happens next? The most likely scenario, according to multiple think tanks, including the Center for Strategic and International Studies and the Brookings Institution, is what analysts call a painful extension. Negotiations drag on past the July 1st deadline. USMCA enters the annual review cycle, creating a cloud of uncertainty. Eventually, after months or possibly years of difficult talks, the three countries agree on a modified version of the agreement, with new side letters and bilateral protocols. Canada makes concessions on dairy and digital streaming. The United States adjusts some of its Section 232 tariffs. Neither side gets everything it wants, but the agreement survives in some form because the alternative, a complete collapse of North American free trade, is too catastrophic for anyone to accept. The second scenario is more alarming. Trump, frustrated by what he sees as Canadian defiance, uses the USMCA review as a platform to extract maximum concessions. He threatens withdrawal. Markets panic. The Canadian dollar drops. Investment flows out of both countries. The negotiations become a test of political will, with each leader trying to prove to their domestic audience that they will not back down. In this scenario, the process becomes an annual crisis revisited every year until 2036, with businesses unable to plan more than 12 months ahead. The third scenario, which most analysts give a low probability but which cannot be dismissed, is a full breakdown. The United States walks away from the agreement. Trade between the two countries reverts to World Trade Organization rules. Average tariffs would be relatively low, around 3%, but specific sectors like light trucks would face tariffs as high as 25%. The psychological impact would be enormous. 3 decades of North American integration would be unwound in a matter of months. And the biggest winner would be China, which would happily fill the void left by a fractured Western trading bloc. What is most striking about this entire situation is how much it has changed the way Canadians see the United States. Public opinion toward America is at a 20-year low. Canadian tourism to the United States dropped by 40% in early 2025. A majority of Canadians say they plan to avoid traveling to America entirely. Canadian ambassador to the United States, Kirsten Hillman, said that Canadians took for granted that a strong, predictable, open relationship based on mutual benefit would always exist. That assumption has been shattered, and rebuilding that trust, even if the trade agreement survives, will take years. Mark Carney understands something fundamental about this moment. He is not just negotiating a trade deal. He is navigating a redefinition of what it means to be a middle power in a world where your most important ally has become your most unpredictable threat. His strategy combines economic diversification, military investment, diplomatic coalition building, and a willingness to publicly challenge the most powerful person on earth. Whether that strategy succeeds depends on variables that no one can fully predict. How far is Trump willing to go? How much economic pain can Canada absorb? Will Congress intervene to limit presidential tariff authority? Will the USMCA review produce a workable compromise or a permanent fracture? The answer to those questions will be determined in the weeks and months ahead. The July 1st deadline is approaching, the clock is ticking, and two nations that share the longest undefended border in the world are staring at each other across a widening divide, each waiting for the other to blink. If you are an American watching this, ask yourself whether pushing your closest ally into the arms of China is really in your national interest. If you are a Canadian watching this, ask yourself how far you are willing to go to protect your sovereignty and what you are willing to sacrifice to do it. These are not hypothetical questions anymore. They are the questions that will define North America for the next decade, and the time to answer them is running out. Please hit the bell icon and subscribe to my channel for daily updates.